I think needs to be done in order to bring about this new world and all of the great things we hope to see is to think about what change we can do as an individual, right? Starting first with ourselves, thinking about the new habits that we want to form, the new ways of thinking we want to be exposed to, and then how we bring that into our network and circle of friends and families and find other people who may also want to do something and really work and collaborate on creating those solutions. I feel very excited that there is a group of middle and high schoolers that meet together every week at the house that I live in Culver City. It's a group of, young people who are really passionate about learning about this, their classmates and what needs we have in our society. How do we address things like bullying and really being mindful with our language, really thinking about what the role is that young people can have in really making a change in their community. We're really thinking right now about how we can, through learning about our talents and our skills, what kinds of services and professions and things we can offer to our community. My name is Kimberly Wu. I live in Culver City, California, and I currently work as a program coordinator for Children's Hospital Los Angeles in their young adult and adolescent medicine division. What I do there is provide training and opportunities to work with teachers and educators to support young people in really thinking about their health and creating healthy environments. I was born in 1988 in Queens, New York City. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. My family, they are immigrants to the United States from Taiwan, and before then they're originally from Zhejiang province in China. And so growing up in that neighborhood, growing up in a house with my cousins and other community members, it was always very noisy, very dynamic. There was always food cooking. You always smell something at all hours of the day and kids running around the house all the time. Remember my childhood, growing up in New York City, lots of new things all the time, new people all the time, and lots of noise. I remember we had this one tree in front of our house and it had really beautiful flowers in the springtime, and that was probably one of the most peaceful places, just sitting under the tree, because everywhere else there's cars, there's people, there's lots of busyness. I grew up with two siblings, my younger brother and my younger sister. My brother is 1 year younger than me and my sister is 4 years younger than me. I like to think that I also grew up with a lot of they're not my actual siblings, but my cousins, because we all lived in the same house. Love my parents so much. They're very special to me. They have overcome a lot of challenges in their lives. Both of them live with polio, and so they had polio when they were kids growing up in Taiwan. And so that meant physically they were limited by their condition, and that also meant a lot of, folks not understanding how to really treat them with respect or just understanding their needs. Once they came to New York, my dad barely knew English. My mom knew no English at all, and they really tried to start their own business, make their community, raise their children, and I know it took a lot of hard work and effort. My dad started his own business as a sort of computer, like hardware, software repair person, and earned like a great reputation. He ended up working very closely with the city, and I think that really opened a lot of doors for him. But I remember when we were younger, he would travel everywhere via the subway and public transportation because we don't have cars. And now that I'm older, I think about it, and it must have been so difficult for him to like walk up all the stairs, to take the subway. He has like crutches and he's carrying all of his like tools, and it's difficult, and he never complained about it. And my mom, she worked as an accountant back in Taiwan, and so when she came here, she mostly spent her time raising us as children. And once we eventually, were able to save up more money, we left New York City, we moved to the suburbs, we moved to Long Island. She started teaching, and she loves teaching Mandarin. Unfortunately, my parents weren't always around, so our grandparents raised us. Like, our grandparents were there with like the 6 kids, because like my uncle and my aunt were also working. I remember one time we did try to all do a trip together to Washington, D.C., and it was very epic because everybody went together, so we ended up renting like 3 vans or something, and everybody just drove together. And because everybody wanted to save money, I think we only rented like 2 hotel rooms, so everybody's like crowding into one room. But I know that they had wanted, the adults really wanted the children to go because they wanted us to see what the capital of the country was, to really go to the White House, to learn about the history of this country. And that is something that, I still think about, because I remember even in the car, it was so illegal, but we had like people sitting on we were just trying to make it work, we didn't have a lot of resources. But I remember like my brother was sitting on a stool, like on the floor, on the bottom of the car, everyone's holding him for safety. But yeah, so I remember that was one of the trips we took. By this time I had moved to Long Island, and it was a very different kind of environment. I, actively can recall when I started my first day at, middle school in this new city, and just even recognizing that the diversity that I had experienced growing up was not reflected in my classmates and the population was it was definitely noticeable, right? And so it was just a very different kind of environment, a different kind of expectation. While growing up there, one of the big aspirations for a lot of the young people is to get into, these really top universities and colleges, and so it means everyone's applying to like 20 colleges and universities. So I applied to a bunch of liberal arts universities. I ended up getting into Barnard. It was very exciting. I visited the campus and I loved it because that was what I found out. It was an all-women's college. So you can imagine, I showed up and I'm like, oh, it's all like women here, all girls here. And I found out, yeah, that's part of why people come to Barnard, is because women find it empowering to be around other women and to learn from their professors who are women and have their dean be women, and really be in an environment where your gender does not become a barrier. It's not necessarily something you have to worry about all the time. And during this time, I also had the great bounty and privilege to be friends with people and women specifically who were also very vulnerable and passionate and strong and empowered. And that was very exciting and very inspiring, because I think growing up, you know, in a household predominantly with boys, predominantly in a cultural setting that's very patriarchal, I didn't even realize that those were the veils, like the barriers that were kind of holding my own thoughts back. So to free myself even from that and to examine, you know, culture and to examine history, to examine patterns that exist and traditions, very freeing, very needed. And one of my best friends in this endeavor, you know, happens to be a Baha'i. And I remember when we all first met, orientation, you know, every floor has those like hall meetings on the first night. Everyone's going around, they're sharing their names, they're sharing who they are. And I remember, you know, this young woman shared, I'm a Baha'i, and everybody was pretty confused because they didn't know what that was. Through recognizing our shared interest in learning and also just learning about what it means to be a good person in this society, that really drew us closer to each other. And then I can't remember exactly when this happened, but we were, you know, this is also as my friendship is unfolding with Sonia and other Baha'is, and I'm learning more about the faith, and sometimes we just have conversations and, you know, something challenging might emerge and everybody's trying to understand what to do. And, you know, a Baha'i might offer like, well, you know, in our religion, we try to think about conflict this way, or we try to think about, you know, not backbiting, and just like little things, right? And usually you're just like, oh, okay, what an interesting new thought, what an interesting new concept. And as you get to know people better, you see that not only do they say those things, but they really try to live by those ideals and those virtues that I also found very refreshing and very, very, very different. You know, I think a lot of times, especially when you're young and you want to change the world, we have all these great ideas, we read these great books, we say these amazing things, and then we don't know what to do. And what to do isn't even just, you know, what I do with my career, but what to do as like a human being that is moving through the world. How do we treat people? Eventually, when our group of friends decided that we wanted to learn about starting a junior youth group, I think that was a big turning point for me, because then I saw behind the scenes, what does it look like to, you know, bring animators together, train animators, go through the training, be confused because there's so many questions. You do Ruhi Book 1 and you're like, well, what is this? How does this have anything to do with starting a youth group? Or how does it have anything to do with youth empowerment? And then you slowly learn that through, you know, it's really through peeling back all of these layers of what we perceive as our identity and going to our spiritual identity, that becomes what sustains all of our efforts, right? And what motivates us. Once we went through the training, once we actually started the groups, that was a huge turning point for me, because it was so different. You know, conducting a junior youth group, the time it goes into planning, the types of relationship you form with the junior youth. It really felt like a space that was open for the young people to explore the questions that were really pressing in their communities and to see themselves as actively being able to do something about it. I not just saw the beauty of like the teachings and then how it affects people's individual lives, but that also what an impact it could have on the wider society. It really wasn't until we were graduating that, you know, and I realized, oh wow, we're all gonna be separating, we're all gonna be going our own ways, and People might travel, people might work. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. And I definitely remember thinking, well, what am I going to do without the Baha'i faith, right? What am I going to do not having my friends who to me represented the closeness to the teachings of the faith, not having them close by. And I think that was when I realized, well, the teachings aren't just my friend. I mean, the teachings are teachings, right? And anyone can have access to them. And I actually think one of my friends shared with me, you can read the writings on your own. Like that's for you. It's for everyone. And that was around the time that I really thought more seriously about my relationship to the faith. And, it was a very private matter. Like I wasn't necessarily talking to everyone about it, but it was something I was slowly trying to learn about on my own and, do some research. The day that I actually declared or decided that I am a Baha'i, or it was a realization that became very clear. It happened to be the day that the Baha'i Center was also commemorating the ascension of Baha'u'llah. So I remember it was like maybe 11 p.m., like it was late at night, we were all talking, and I was specifically talking with Sonia, and I had shared with her, I think I'm a Baha'i. Actually having served full-time, now I can see that experience, my parents appreciate and understand the faith more. At one point my dad even wanted to just study the Baha'i writings with me in Mandarin and Chinese, so we would do that over Skype. And it's interesting because then even that has brought me closer to my family. Like my siblings know my friends. My brother lived with some of my friends who are Baha'is, and they lived in the neighborhood where there's a lot of Baha'i activities happening in New York. So it's funny how when that becomes a part of your life, you do really want to integrate it and be as coherent as possible. Yeah, I would say now, one of the things we do try is just to integrate the principles of the faith and how we interact as a family, because, if there's conflict or if there are things that are difficult and hard, how do we ensure there's justice? How do we ensure there's consultation? How do we really try to practice, patience and think about these spiritual qualities with one another? And it's not always easy, but I think it helps all of us to then think and appreciate our own spiritual journeys. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. As long as your heart is searching, the answer will come to you like a breeze.